175. Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Betterbid.
Here.
Ms. Grauman.
Here.
Mr. Johnson. Mr. McCracken. Mr. Rich. Mr. Shepherd. Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Rosenthal.
Here.
Mr. Reese.
Yes.
Mr. Pagala.
Here.
Chairman Thomas.
Here. We'll look for a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting, November 2nd.
Move it.
Second.
Ms. Grauman.
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes.
Pagala.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. In the discussion, agenda vouchers for Mr. Bradshaw, December 2016 retainer 865, Carabello Resolution 175, Raritan Valley Habitat Resolution 385, Howard Resolution 140, St. Peter's Healthcare 36750. Is there a motion to approve?
Move
I
it.
move that we pay that.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We move into the hearing section first. Couple of changes. Montauk Transit, ZBA 16-00035. Site plan with use variance in which the applicant is looking for approval to use the site as a bus company and store buses at 925 and 945 Route 27, Block 88.01, Lots 7 and 9.01 in the M2 zone, carried to January 5th, no further notification. And second, Paramasamy Chandranathan, ZBA 16-00009, hardship variance in which the applicant's requesting a variance for an undersized lot where 5 acres is the minimum, 2.73 acres is existing proposed at 4292 Route 27 Somerset, Block 6, Lot 24.01, the RR5 zone, carried to February 16th, 2017, no further notification. The rest of the agenda remains. So Carlos de Guayas, ZVA 16-00042, hardship variance in which the applicant is looking for an existing, that the variance is for an existing carport that didn't receive an approval, 157 Second Street, Block 460, Lot 7, in the R40 zone.
Come up, come up.
Mr. Chairman, while he's coming up, Mr. DeGotis had installed a carport some time ago. He did not know that he needed permits. Once he realized that he needed permits, he came in, we talked to him. We also realized that he needed a variance for the carport because the carport is supposed to be 15 feet from the side yard, and it's only 7 feet. There's also 3 existing variances, one for a garden shed, side yard setback for the existing house, and he's a little bit over on the impervious. But the one variance that goes to the carport is the first one listed in the TRC report, which is he's 7 feet instead of the 15 feet. Once, assuming he gets his approvals this evening, we'll process his building permit, but we can't process the building permit until the variance is granted.
Okay, sir, if you raise your right hand for me, do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, state your name just so we have it for the record.
Carlos de Goyas.
Okay. Anything you wanted to add to what Mr. Dominic said?
No, he squared off on.
Okay.
This carport looks almost like it's at the edge. I guess the fence is further in from the side yard as well?
Yes.
Yeah, if you look on the survey, the carport is drawn in there, and you'll see where the existing fence is actually, looks like it's about good 5 feet into the property. And then the carport's about 7 feet, and obviously there's a photo of the existing carport, so you get a sense of its size and height.
Have you talked to your neighbors about it?
Yes, I did.
And nobody's got
No,
a problem?
nobody has a problem. I mean, I've been there for 24 years now, and I've never had a problem. I just did not know that I needed to get a permit for.
Okay.
Because
Happens.
it's not a permanent structure, and I thought that it would look better than the cloth one. Don't like that cloth, so I said, well, let me step it up and put an aluminum one, just to put some.
How long has that been there?
I'd say about 5 months, 6 months, sure.
So in the photo, there's a fence that looks like it's a 6-foot-high
It was
fence.
a white fence that was put on before they opened up the road, so that cul-de-sac for the new houses. So that fence was put there because of all the trees and the darkness there. At that time, I had young kids, and I was done
Yeah, well, my question is, does that fence extend back
back
behind?
Yeah.
So your neighbor's basically looking at the fence, and maybe a little bit of the, say, a little bit of the
Correct,
top of the
yes,
carport?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have other questions?
Do you use the port for a car?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I see something else in it.
There is a car in there now, but I basically put it for like the snow blowers and stuff because the gas smell is bad for my wife when I put them in the garage. So that was my main purpose of putting that out there for my gas. But
So it's really
Right.
an equipment shed, sort of.
Well, yeah, right. No front door though. There's no front door, so it's not like I put expensive
You
stuff.
have a garage,
But
right?
I do have a car in there as well.
You have a garage?
I do have a garage, but I don't put anything that smells like gas because it gets my wife sick. So I decided to put that one on the side of the building.
Anything else? Well, we'll open to the public. Is there anyone who'd like to say anything about this application, ask questions, or make a statement? Okay, we'll close. The board is satisfied with the information, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the variances on ZBA 16-00042.
Second.
Mr. Betterbit,
Yes.
Ms. Grumman,
Yes?
Mr. Rosenthal,
Yes.
Mr. Reese,
Yes.
Pagella,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Okay,
Thank you.
good luck with it. Doublestone Holdings, ZBA 16-00039. Sign variance in which the applicant seeking approval for a sign that was erected in the wrong spot at 315 Route 27, Franklin Park, Block 34.03, Lot 50.01, in the NB zone.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Linna speaks, I'm going to give a little brief introductions, hopefully so that Frank doesn't have to spend too much time. 6 years ago, this sign was installed. I got permits. It was installed in the wrong place. Just one of those things. We gave them the permits. Several years later, we notified them. We've been going back and forth trying to figure out what the best thing to do. We decided the best thing to do was to come in finally to get the variance. We originally wanted them to move the sign, but then we realized between the cost, because there's a water main easement underneath, a water main, but there's no easement. So there's no legal ability for us to do so. But the applicant has agreed that if we allow them to keep the sign where it is, so there is no cost, if we have to move the sign at a later time because there's a water main problem, they will do it and they will grant us the easement. So basically, there was a mistake made 6, 7 years ago. There hasn't been any impact on the sign. We're just trying to clean it up, and the applicant has agreed, if it becomes necessary in the future, to grant us the necessary easement, and we'll move the sign at that time.
Where was this sign supposed to be?
It's supposed to be back, another 10 feet, Frank, or so, I think?
That's correct.
Yeah, but
Yeah, the ordinance requires 10 feet setback from the property line on Route 27. And it happens to be, according to my engineer, 18 feet from the traveled portion of the right-of-way and 10 feet from the edge of pavement.
yeah, there's no
Technically,
problem with
there's
site distance or anything else. It was inspected, it was installed properly. We're just trying to clean it up so there's not an issue in the future.
You agree
And for
with
those of you who've been, I agree with him, but for those of you who've been around as long as I have, remember Aranka's Restaurant on Route 20, Aranka's Restaurant on Route 27? According to my client who's lived in the area, Dr. Cha, he said their sign was in that location as well. Then the ice cream parlor came in, and their sign was in that location. So when he purchased it in 2009, the sign had been there their signs had been at that location for years. We do have Dave Stiers here to offer technical testimony if the board requires it, but I'm in agreement with Mr. Dominic. I never disagree with Mr. Dominic.
Not too often.
Anybody need anything, you've,
Unless it's a billboard.
without getting into
No.
all the details, if there are anything in any of the reports, everything is okay?
Yes, we
Okay.
received one report from the Technical Review Committee, and we can and will comply with the Technical Review Committee's comments.
Any questions? Open to the public. Is there anyone who wants to make a statement? Would you come forward and use the mic at the podium?
Hi, I'm Lonnie Davis. I live at 2 Decatur Lane, which is right on the corner there.
Ms. Davis, I have to swear you in. I'm up here.
Oh,
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth?
yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, I don't have a problem with the sign where it is now, as long as it don't cause any future problems in later. I have a problem, and I would like some clarification on the part where it says they want to be approved for any additional, any additional variances, waivers from design standard. Does that mean that they're talking about specifically that sign, or they can put up or do something later on?
Basically, what that is language in there in case the board wanted to move the sign at this time.
Right.
It would provide for putting the public on notice that that might happen. Doesn't sound like that's going to happen, and once this meeting's done and I write the resolution, they'd have to come back for anything additional.
Okay.
So
'Cause
it's
I don't want to
really-
give a blank check.
Yeah,
That's what
no,
I
it's
don't
not gonna.
want to do.
Right.
Okay.
The only thing they're looking for approval for is for that existing
Is-
sign. That is it.
Okay. All right, because the sign is not, it doesn't impede the visual coming out of the lawn, because that's my concern. It's already a crowded street, and coming out of, the traffic is terrible. But the sign that's there now does not have a problem with it.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Anyone else? Good point. All right, then we'll close and go right to any other issues, or is there a motion?
I move the approval of the application, subject to the requirement that if at some future point it's necessary to move that sign, that the applicant will provide the township with an easement, and will move the sign at its own cost.
I second.
Mr. Betterbid?
Yes.
Ms. Grauman?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes.
Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Mr. Briella?
Yes.
Chairman Thomas?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Have a nice
Okay.
holiday.
101 Metlers Road, ZBA 16-00036. Site plan with use and sign variances in which the applicant is looking to convert roughly one half of their building to a charter school. 101 Metlers Road, Somerset, Block 511, Lot 1.02, in the ROL zone. And
That white cell phone building
Yeah.
next to the.
anytime, you go.
Oh, okay.
You're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Landfrit appearing on behalf of the applicant, 101 Metlers Road, LLC, and Central Jersey College Prep Charter School. This is an application for use variance and site plan approval with a few minor bulk variants attached thereto to relocate the existing Central Jersey College Prep Charter School, which is located on Schoolhouse Road, to 101 Metlers Road. As the board may or may not recall, there have been 2 previous applications with respect to the school where they had intended to relocate to another location on New Brunswick Road, which never materialized. They now have an agreement with the owner of the Metlers Road property to lease the property for the charter school. So should the board grant the approvals that we are requesting, we are hoping that by September, the charter school can relocate. As the board is also probably aware, given some other applications, that the situation that they're currently in is not the best of situations, and they do need to get out of there. I do have 5 witnesses this evening. I hope to have them all testify fairly briefly, but I have the site engineer, the architect, I have the principal of the school, I have a traffic consultant, and a planner. So those are the witnesses that I will be presenting this evening. I will start with my first witness, Mr. Stiers. Also, for the record, I note that the board, there's only 6 board members this evening. So at the end of the evening, I may reserve the right to defer the vote since I'm entitled to have 7 members. We'll discuss that at the end of the evening, but hopefully we can get this.
Is that a waste of our time if he doesn't want?
No?
No, he's allowed to do that. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And your name for the record?
Craig Stiers, Stires.
Mr. Stiers, what is your occupation?
Professional engineer in state of New Jersey.
Can you give the board a brief outline of your educational and professional background?
Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from Lehigh University. I've been licensed since 1990.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
Just put that on record and let's go.
Okay.
We've seen you before. No
Thank you.
Mr. Stiers, you prepared the site plan, which is the subject of this application.
Yes.
Okay. And there is an exhibit on the board to our left that is a colored rendering of the plant, one of the sheets of the plant set that was submitted in conjunction with that application.
Yes.
And that would be sheet 5 of 6, which is the grading utility and soil erosion control plan.
Yes.
I'd like to mark that as A1, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Stiers, can you briefly take the board through what the existing conditions are on the subject property?
Sure. The existing site's located at 101 Metlers Road, also known as Lot 1.02, Block 511. It contains just over 29 acres. I believe it was a former Exxon facility at one point. Also has 282 existing parking spaces, stormwater detention basin in the front along Metlers Road, and just over 162,000 square feet of existing building. If you look at the rendering on the board, you can see the entrance off of Metlers Road, and then you have a loop road that pretty much goes around the existing building, parking to the north, and the entrance, show you. Main entrance to the facility is right here in the corner, the northwest portion of the building. There are some various other entrances, but that is the main entrance coming in.
Okay. And this application is to utilize a portion of the existing building for the school. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you briefly point out, and I know the architect will go into more detail, which portion of the building will be utilized for school purposes?
It's essentially the 2 wings to the west of the facility. So you have a northerly wing here, a connection, a southerly wing. Just behind that is what will be the cafeteria. And then we will be adding approximately 9,800 square foot addition for a new gymnasium and associated locker rooms.
Okay. The large brown area is, which is shown on the plan, is not part of this application.
Correct.
Okay, and the building currently is vacant?
Yes.
Okay. With respect to the zoning, we are in an ROL zone,
Yes.
and schools are not permitted in an ROL zone, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, as far as the other bulk requirements of the zone, do we meet the bulk requirements of the ROL zone, or will we be seeking variances in conjunction with this application?
There's some existing condition variances, front yard, side yard, but they are existing at this point.
Okay, are there any new variances being proposed as a result of this application?
With the addition of the gymnasium, one of the conditions in the ordinance is that it's to be, I believe, 100 feet from a gas line. There are 3 gas lines along the property to the south of the building. So the corner of the proposed gymnasium would be just over 70 feet from the first gas line.
Okay. Have you had any communication or correspondence with the company that owns those gas lines regarding the construction of the gymnasium within their easement?
Yes.
And can you indicate what the result of the communications you had with them was?
They are okay with what we were proposing. We have an email back from them saying that we sent them the plans via email. They reviewed them and responded to us saying that they are okay with the modifications.
And have you yet provided that information to the township, or will that be part of a subsequent submission?
I did forward the email to both Vince and Julio, but I can also provide a hard copy.
Okay. Other than the construction of the gymnasium, are there any other site improvements that are being proposed in conjunction with this application?
In order to construct the gymnasium, the loop road in this alignment right here, the existing condition, we're going to bump that out just a little bit so that the gymnasium can be constructed. So it's a modification to the loop road, but the characteristics will stay the same once it's completed. And then also a sidewalk alongside the loop road, because ultimately this will be the bus drop-off for the school so that the students can enter either through the entrance in through the new gymnasium, or there's an existing entrance right here.
With respect to the reconfiguration of the road where the gymnasium is being constructed, have you reviewed the geometry of that reconfiguration that you're proposing, and does that meet acceptable engineering standards for the geometry?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And I know we do have a traffic consultant, but basically, operationally, can you indicate how the proposed plan is going to work as far as vehicular traffic entering and exiting the site?
Obviously, all traffic will come in off the main entrance, turn left at the T intersection. All buses will continue around the outside of the parking lot, make a left onto this loop road that goes behind the building, and be able to stack so that the drop-off can happen at the indicate on the south side near the gymnasium. All other vehicles, teachers, students, drop-off, visitors, other than the buses, will come in and park in the main parking lot. It's the intent to kind of work from west to east, so the teachers would have the first 2.5 bays, I guess you could call it. The students would have the easterly side, and then any visitors or parent drop-off would be directed into the third bay here, and then any access would take up the northerly side. And as you can see on the plans, we've had a series of signs that'll direct the various individuals to where they should park.
Okay, and we'll get into the staff reports a little later. There's some comments about modifying or adding some additional signage. I assume you have no problem adding additional signage or sitting down and working out with staff the appropriate signage so that everybody knows where they need to be going on the subject property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding the buses, you indicate that the buses are going to loop around the parking lot and then go around the back of the building. how many buses can you stack around that building on that loop road?
From the end of the sidewalk, essentially that where we have proposed on the south side, it's just off the edge here, but around the back to the beginning of the loop road in the rear, that could hold 26 buses.
Okay. And with respect to the sidewalk area that you are proposing to construct, where the children would be exiting the buses and entering the building, how many buses can stack at the sidewalk at one time?
I believe we have shown approximately 8.
Okay. And what would happen then is that when those buses empty and leave, the next set of buses, if there are 26 there waiting at one time, would have the ability to then pull up and discharge the students, and that process would continue. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, we talked about how buses enter the site, how parents enter the site, how students enter the site. How do people get off the property?
Same thing. The buses would continue out the back, and there's a stop sign here, so they would go back out the main entrance. All the students and faculty visitors would have, either this would be two-way, so they would come out the adjacent driveway next to the building, or come out around the back side, and then there's stop signs on all three sides, and then come out the entrance.
Okay. So there is no reason for any of the vehicles of either the faculty members, students, or parents that are dropping off students to really have access to the loop road in the area where the buses are in fact stacking around the rear of the building. Is that correct? Thank you. Is there any signage on the subject property at the present time?
There's currently a sign right here for the former tenant, which is set back quite a bit off the road.
Okay, and we are proposing to use that existing sign for the school?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not proposing to change anything, but the sign does exceed the sign requirements for that zone?
Right.
Okay, and I assume that sign was previously approved for the previous user and has been there for a while?
It appears that way, yes.
Okay.
Actually, just technically, it exceeds the sign required or permitted for the use.
Right.
So if it's a
Correct.
A permitted use, light industrial, whatever, that's actually a compliant sign. Now that it's changing to a school, the sign requirement is lower. That's what's
Right.
resulting in the variance.
We stand corrected. Thank you, Mr. Healy. But we're asking you to avail ourselves of the existing sign.
Correct.
And can you indicate what the size of that sign is?
The length is 12 feet, and the height is 40 inches.
Okay.
So roughly a little over 36 square feet, close to 40.
Okay, and when you measured the sign for the purpose of determining whether, the dimensions, did you measure the entire sign, including there's pillars on each side of the sign as are depicted on the plans, is that correct?
There are pillars shown, but the dimensioning I just gave only includes the sign, not the pillars.
Okay, so the record is clear. Thank you. Now, in conjunction with this application, let's go back. With respect to the gymnasium that we're proposing to construct, does the addition of that additional impervious coverage require stormwater management?
No, we're just under.
Okay, so
Literally just under, but
okay, so
I should say the state standards, we're under the state standards, but as far as the township standards, technically, I believe it's more than 500 square feet. So anyway, what we're doing is modifying the outlet structure. So there's really no need to modify or change any of the detention basins. It's just the orifices within the outlet structure itself.
okay, and those changes to the orifices have been reviewed by the engineering department?
Yes.
Okay. And other than the gymnasium and the sidewalk, there is no additional impervious coverage that's being proposed?
Correct.
Have you had an opportunity to review the staff reports that were generated in conjunction with this application?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to go through them, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. There was a comment by the Health Department concerning whether public water, and then there's a well shown on the property. Is this property serviced by public water or by well water?
I believe it's by public water.
Okay, and if there is a well and it's not necessary, I assume the applicant will abandon it?
Correct.
I'll direct your attention now to the report of Mr. Vega, the Assistant Township Engineer, dated December 6th, 2016. The report contains 9 pages. And just for the record, the iteration that's before the board this evening is a plan that has been revised. We made an initial submission, and we had some meetings with both the township planner, the township engineer, other township officials to review the plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and in reviewing the report, most of the comments that are in there were comments that were generated as a result of the first submission, and therefore, there's a lot of comments to say satisfied because we have now revised the plans to address those comments. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now going through the report, are there any comments that are deemed not satisfied that we cannot comply with?
I do not believe so.
Okay. I'm going to direct your attention only to one item, which is item number 27, which is the curve in front of the gymnasium, which we discussed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Vega would ask that we straighten out that curve. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in your opinion, is that necessary?
I don't believe it's necessary.
Okay.
But again, we can work with him. If we need to stretch it out a little bit more, we could.
Okay.
The intent is to stay as far away from the gas line as possible. It's mounted coming towards the gas line, so we just moved it enough to get the building in position and then getting it back onto the existing loop road as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And the curve.
Let me speak to that, because I had the same comment. I mean, the curb line, I described it as an S-curve, but the curb goes in and out, back and forth. I mean, it should be, just a smooth curve around that building, and instead, it's going in and out, which is going to, not allow for, a smooth line or queue of the buses. So,
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we were to move this out and kick out the loop road, like I said, I'm just trying to keep it as far away from the gas line as I can.
well, maybe the gymnasium needs to be made a little smaller. I mean, because the other comment that Julio had is comment number 9, is that the building appears too close to the proposed curb line. I mean, the building is pretty much right up on the curb. So that's his opinion on comment 9.
I guess like you said, it's his opinion. I don't. What is the definition of being too close? I mean, we have a curb, we have a sidewalk that allows the student to get off the bus and then get to the entrances. So what is too close, or how far do I need to be? I mean, I'll work with him, but what is too close, or what's too far?
You'd have to ask him. But
Right.
I mean, nonetheless, you have in a way a blank slate here, in that you have a proposed building, and you've designed it so that the curb is not this smooth curve around the building. It kind of jogs in and out, which just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it should be corrected.
The issue is, Mr. Healy, I don't disagree with you that there's something that could be done to deal with the curve, and it can be modified. I think it's probably a discussion that we have to have with Mr. Vega,
Yeah.
Mr. Stiers, and also our traffic engineer to make sure it works to everybody's satisfaction. Again, the competing interest is, we're trying to keep away from the pipeline as much as possible, but there is room to maneuver that.
Yeah, I mean, and a somewhat related question is, the gymnasium has seating for, I think, at least 200 people, which makes it wider than, perhaps it could be. I mean, does it need to be that wide? Do you need seating for 200 people? What's the purpose for that? Maybe it's a question for somebody else, but you make the building a little bit smaller, now you have a little bit more room to work with around there.
But I think again, comment number 9, which we do take issue with, I mean, we constructed a building, we constructed a sidewalk in front of the building and a curb. And I don't think that's violative of any standards. He indicates in item number 9, building appears to be too close. Again, there is no standard that he's alleging that we're violating. And in many instances, outside of gymnasium or outside of school, there's a building, there's a sidewalk, there's a curb, and there's a road, and that's what we have.
Well, I would say that agree to work with them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't work with them, you come back to the board, but I don't remember in 11 years once any one of your applicants have hundreds of them, having come back to the board to take care of one of these issues. So I would say work with them.
I don't have a problem. We've always worked with them, and I think maybe once in 11 years we were back, but.
Yeah, when? Go ahead. Tell me when, Pete. Your memory's worse than mine. I'm not saying a lot.
Okay. With respect to the remaining comments, we can comply with all of the other comments contained in the report?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I believe Mr. Healy's report dated November 29th, which deals with many issues. I just want to make sure that if there's any engineering questions that he raised, that we deal with those. If we can go to page, I think, 5, item number 7, deals with his comments that are engineering comments. He indicates under 7A, the site plan needs to provide a sidewalk in back of the handicap ramps.
They are shown on the backside of it.
Let me direct you to a few. On page, well, and Julio had the same comment, or same question about the ring road. The plans you don't have the turning radii for the buses, so, we don't know.
I think we went over that in our meeting, but we can add that to the plan.
Yeah,
And then also, I believe, Jay has an exhibit which also
Okay,
shows
well,
that,
that's,
so.
okay, so we'll get to that. There was a suggestion that the ring road would be one way.
That's
I don't
fine.
know if that's intended, but obviously then signage and pavement markings to
Yep.
to enforce that. And you may have addressed this, so excuse me if I didn't hear it, but what's the plan for student drop-off by parents? Where would that happen?
The students, the parents would park their vehicles, and I think Mr. Stiers, and we can get to it too with Mr. Troutman, indicated that in the sections of the parking lot closest to the building, they will be designated the areas for student drop-off. The parents would park the vehicles, they would exit the vehicle with the child, they would be greeted, and we'll hear additional testimony by a representative of the school, teacher or teachers, and they will be walked across the roadway into the school. So we are not going to be pulling up in front of the building to drop the students off.
Okay, and then the other question is, my comment 5, I had a number of comments on the parking calculations. I think in some ways, the parking calculations were probably too low, and I think in other places, with respect to the rest of the site, the manufacturing, the rest of the building is probably too low, or too high. So have you had a chance to redo the calculations per these comments, and does the site comply?
We will, first of all, we will up the chart, like you said, but I've looked at that, and based on the numbers, I think we're still way over the number. For instance, if, like you said, the 81 for the gymnasium, that's the same number I came up with. Roughly speaking, even if we were to have as many as 400 people in the auditorium, 1 per 4 seats, that's another 100. Even if you had the auditorium and the gymnasium at the same time, that's only 180 parking spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have 100 more than that.
So basically your testimony is that you're going to revise it per our requirements, and you're not seeking any variance, you comply.
Correct.
That is correct.
Taking into account both the requirements for the school and the remainder of the building using assuming
Yeah.
a manufacturer.
Let's talk about the remainder of the building. Right now, we have no user, and quite frankly, this application is to use the square footage that we are showing for the school as the only use in the building, period. The remainder of the building, if it were to be used, we would come back to the board or to the TRC or whoever would have jurisdiction to review the user, and obviously, we may have to amend the site plan to create more parking. We may have to reconfigure things, but what we're seeking approval for tonight is the use of the building that we are renting for the school, with an understanding and agreement that there shall be no other users in that building without a subsequent development application.
Are you renting the entire building or just your part?
My client, the school, is leasing just the front part of the building, which was depicted by Mr. Stiers, the two wings. Mr. Stiers, again, if you want to go back and just show the part that will be used as a school.
It's roughly half of the building, is that correct?
Yeah.
2 wings,
So it's roughly half of the building?
Roughly.
roughly, yes.
Okay.
So you're consuming the entire current parking lot just for your part of the building?
The 282 parking spaces will be used by the school. That is correct.
Okay, so if someone else rents the other part of the building, which is the bigger portion of the building than what you're renting, there's no parking for those people, right?
There may or may not be, depending on the user and depending on the need. Obviously, as Mr. Stiers testified, this is a 30-acre site. Mr. Stiers, briefly, how much of the site is developed and how much of it is undeveloped at the present time?
Let's see. The lot coverage is only at 10.6%.
And is
Pervious coverage is
is
25.
is all that site developable by environmental standards? Is any of that land reserved for wetlands or environment?
I don't believe so, no. Maybe far in the back, but that would be the, very close to the property line.
And now adjoining that building, I'm familiar with that site because there's a park adjacent to it. Will you be fencing off your site from the park?
We're not,
park area?
we're not proposing to construct any fencing. Actually, the area between us and the park is the pipeline.
Right.
And that's the area between us and the park. But to answer your question, if a user comes along, and again, hypothetically, we don't know what it is, we have enough room perhaps to build another separate entrance to the site because we have significant road frontage. We have ability to create additional parking. There's a lot of things we can do, but we can't do them unless we know what the user is. And for example, if we had a user for the remaining portion of that site that's a church that only uses it on Sunday when the school's not there, we may not need any more parking. So our position is we're asking for the approval of that the 282 spaces that are there are allocated to the school, and that any future development will be the subject of another application.
Well, the purpose of my question was that parking lot was dedicated to the occupancy of that whole building, not just a fraction of that building.
When it was used by Exxon, and that building was used for office and warehousing, yes, it was allocated for the entire building.
Pete, could you go over again, you mentioned that the ring road was going to be one-way. Show me exactly how it's going to be one-way and what portions might be two-way.
The only portion that's one-way is where the buses go around the building.
This would be one way.
Okay,
The rest would be two way.
okay, I was a little
Yeah, it's
confused.
Just limited to the, I guess you could say, the back side of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Does the owner of the building approve of your parking situation?
He is the one who authorized me to make the representation that we will not develop the rest of the building or use the rest of the building without a subsequent application.
And whose responsibility, if there is another tenant that comes in, whose responsibility is it to provide the additional parking? Is it the owner's or yours?
It would be the owner's responsibility to provide the parking for the next tenant, if additional parking is
Right,
necessary.
if it occurs.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I can speak to that briefly, I think if this was a site that was very constrained, and there was no opportunity to provide additional parking or to make modifications, I would suggest that you not consider this, because then, they're basically painting themselves into a corner. But I think in this situation, you can see even on their site plan, they could theoretically, if there was another user and they needed more parking, they could expand the parking lot to the north, or the area that's to the north.
No, but someone has to pay for that. That's what I'm saying.
And they're telling you that the owner of the building is aware of this restriction, and they would be responsible. They would have to come back to the board, depending on the nature of that use and the parking requirements that would result from it. They would need both. They would need a site plan approval from this board, and you would look at it, and obviously with the input of township staff, to prove that that site works for both the school and whatever that use happens to be. And Mr. Lanford, I think brought up a legitimate, potential use of, example, there could be a church or some other use where, maybe have shared parking, and they don't actually even need any more parking based on schools during the week and it's something else on the weekends.
Right, yeah, depends.
Or if there's some type of, office use, well, then obviously they're gonna need a heck of a lot more parking. But they have a very large site that they could accommodate that.
Mr. Stiers, in order to assist the board, you have an aerial photograph of the subject property?
Yes.
Can you mark that as A2? And on A2, can you sort of outline the property limits of the subject property? I mean, they're marked on the exhibit, but they're sort of hard to see.
Right. Yeah, it's shown with a red line. I can just trace over it. There's the boundary of the property. I think back up to Mettler's, and then you see the existing parking lot. But you can see there's a vast area to the north that we can almost put a whole nother parking lot here if we had to. And, for argument's sake, you could put another driveway in here and have totally separate altogether. So the school could have this area. If this building were to be rented for some other use, we could almost create another parking lot. And there's plenty of area to expand with the existing detention basin.
Yeah, the question wasn't whether you have enough room. It's obvious you have enough room. It's just who would pay for it.
Right.
If that would become a problem.
Yeah, I would, most cases, if the new tenant and the owner would have to work that out, as part of the any type of application or commitment.
As long as the owner approves of what you guys are doing.
And I think just to reiterate, I think the fact that they do have room is very important, because as I said before, if the site was basically already filled up, well, I don't think this would not be an appropriate solution. But again, they do have the room. And just one last follow-up: where are you on your impervious coverage? What's the requirement, and where are you in terms of that percentage?
Yeah, I was reading the wrong one. The impervious coverage required is 30%. We're at 25.
Okay.
So we probably have another 60,000 square feet we could add.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Healy, anything before I jump to number 7?
No,
Yeah.
I mean, if you need to address number 7, I figured that would be, those are kind of technical things.
Yeah, and all I want to address is that we can comply with all of the items in number 7 of Mr. Healy's report.
Yeah, we actually intended to give you a lighting, but when we went out there, the lights weren't on, so, well, that's not a problem. And the rest are, like you guys said, we'll work it out with you guys.
Thank you. I have no further questions of this witness.
Okay, board questions.
I have a question. Is the owner going to discontinue the truck parking on the property?
Yes. That the trucks are parked in the parking lot that will be used by the school. So it's actually their trailers, not trucks, but the trailers will obviously have to be removed.
Okay. Were you going to address Mark's comment 3 with a different witness
Hang on.
about the transmission line?
Well, we addressed it to the extent that we got the permission of the transmission company, which would allow us to construct the gymnasium within the areas that we've depicted. As far as justifying the variance that we are requesting from the township ordinance, that will be the testimony of the planner.
Okay. How was that location picked? Was that the architect or the engineer?
I probably worked with the owner to select that location.
Okay.
And it was really, and I went over this the other day. As you can see, the main entrance is here. The school is taking this area, including this portion, so the remaining area is really not gonna be part of the school. So we thought we could just fit it in this notch right here. It's adjacent to the gymnasium, to the cafeteria, which, in most cases, when you go to a gym, they usually are associated with each other just for, refreshments or whatever. So we kind of cordoned those two together. We're using the face of the cafeteria as well as the existing face. And I think, Mark, you brought up to make it smaller. I think it's pretty tight as it is. You don't see many gymnasiums with just 5 rows of seating. So, it may seem like it's 600 people, but, you see most gyms in small schools are probably 10 rows high, and this is only 5 rows high on each side. So I thought I made it as tight as I possibly could, and still, beyond the court itself, it's only 3 or 4 feet. So I think it's as limited as we can possibly get it.
So the walls of the gymnasium are beyond and by court, what type of court? What's the?
As it's shown on there is a basketball court.
Okay, so beyond, so just to give the board, that's the reason is so the board can get a sense of the dimensions we're talking about. So in that kind of lighter brown, that's a basketball court?
Correct.
And then beyond the edges of that basketball court, you said it goes how many feet to each side?
Well, on either side, you're 3 or 4 feet.
Either side.
Either side, like I said, you only have 5 rows worth of bleachers, 5 rows high, which to me is pretty low. And then the last bleacher, the lowest seat, is pretty much right on the edge of the court.
So how far in terms of feet? Is that 10 feet, 20 feet from the edge of the basketball court?
From the court to the bleachers?
To the wall?
Oh, to the wall?
Yeah.
I think I made the bleachers.
The architect may have the number rather than have
the
Mr.
architect
Stiers.
here. Okay,
Yes.
sorry, I didn't know the architect was here. Okay, thank you. So basically, you're saying it needs, the testimony is that in talking with your client, that you decided that the gym needed to be there as opposed to somewhere else, because the chosen location is creating the need for the variance.
Right.
And if you were to put it somewhere else, so for example, I'm not saying this is good from a school operation perspective, but at least as far as the variance, if you were to put it in the notch between the 2 wings, you would have no variance.
Right.
So were there any other locations looked at, and why were those locations discounted?
Yeah, I'll leave that for the architect, because I think they did look at it a couple, this area for one, but I'll let him address that.
Okay.
Yeah, Mark, do we know why the ordinance is 100 feet?
Well, I think Vince will probably speak to this more than I can, because I think he knows a little bit more of the history, but I think it came about after the Edison fire, and a lot of towns passed an ordinance similar to this to keep a certain distance from gas transmission lines.
Do we know what the blast zone is?
No, and it really had nothing to do with it. Pete actually knows a lot of it. Has nothing to do with the blast zone. It has to do with protecting people from being near the pipeline, not protecting the buildings from the pipeline. It was exactly the opposite. They wanted to keep people away from the pipeline, and that was just an arbitrary figure that they came up with, that a lot of towns passed ordinances. There was no science to providing blast zones or anything else. They said 100 feet away, people will stay away from the pipeline.
So wouldn't we want to be more conservative with school children than even residential houses?
Well, the answer is that that's what you're deciding tonight, but the reason and the rationale for it was not to protect the building.
No.
It was to keep people away from the pipeline, so it had nothing to do with the
There's
blast.
people in the building. So it has nothing to do, so I would be skeptical, putting my grandkids in that building next to, in close proximity to.
That's something for you to consider, and the applicant will address that. I'm just pointing out the rationale for what that
Well,
ordinance was.
yeah, but just so the board at the end of the day needs to make a decision based on fact and based on the relative level of risk. I mean, we have gas transmission lines running all over town, right back behind people's homes.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
we have two of them in Somerset Run.
Yeah, and that literally run closer than 75 feet to the back of people's homes where people are living and sleeping. So, my understanding is the risk is not when people are in their buildings and the transmission line is underground, just sitting. The risk, 99.9%, I'm making up that figure, is during construction. I mean, the Edison fire, that thing happened when there was a truck doing earthwork and nicked, and that's where the fire. They don't just necessarily. This is my understanding of it.
I lived in North Edison when that pipeline
Yeah,
exploded.
I remember. I watched it myself.
And the people in Durham Woods there didn't expect the possibility of a pipeline exploding behind their homes.
I hear you, but my point is, if you're considering the granting of this variance or not, the fact that it's there near a building, I don't think it would be. I don't know if you necessarily want to deny the variance because there's a school there and it's going to spontaneously blow up. The actual risk is during construction. However you make that decision is, I think you just want to keep that in mind.
So it was probably a waste of time passing these distance rules from gas pipelines.
No,
There's a safety factor, the reason they pass those rules.
you can make the decision however you wish. I'm just saying the risk is during construction, not, they don't just spontaneously blow up just because they're there. It's during construction. And if you feel that enough is a reason for you to deny the variance, then you're free to do that. I'm just making sure you're aware of that. The relative risk and when the risk is there.
And just let me clarify, and if you looked at the plans carefully, the building is not within the easement, the pipeline easement. The reason we are seeking the variance is because we are violating the township ordinance, not because we are within the pipeline's easement. The other thing, Mr. Reese, that you also mentioned is on the other side of the pipeline is the county park, and if you indicate you go there, and if you see what's there, there is a gazebo, and there are baseball fields that are outside closer to the pipeline than this school, or than the gymnasium. And, if the issue was an issue of explosion, and there are children there, they're outside exposed as opposed to somebody being in a building. So the county park and the county facilities and the county amenities are closer to the pipeline than this building.
And with due respect, those facilities not used as many hours as the school is used. It's recreational use, on the weekend and occasional use. Because I've used those facilities.
All right, any other questions? We'll open to the public then, if there's anyone who wants to ask this witness questions concerning his testimony. That's what it's limited to. All right, then we'll close to the public for this witness and move on to the second witness.
Mr. Feldman?
going to swear you in while he's still doing that. If you'll raise your right hand for me, do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name for the record.
David H. Feldman, Feldman, principal of Feldman and Feldman Architects, Colts Neck, New Jersey.
Thanks.
Mr. Feldman, can you briefly give the board the benefit of your professional and educational background?
Yes, I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, as well as about 12 other states. I've testified before this board in the past, as well as other boards throughout the state of New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Feldman, there are two exhibits that you are going to rely on. I have marked them A3 and A4. Before going to the exhibits, can you tell the board what A3 and A4 are?
Yes, A3 is the architectural elevations that were prepared by my office, and A4 are the floor plans that were prepared by my office as well.
Okay. Can you briefly take the board through A3 to indicate what the elevation changes are going to be made as a result of this project?
Yes. Basically, the only change to the structure itself is going to occur on the left elevation, as we have it called out, and that would be the addition to the building, which is a gymnasium of approximately 9,800 square feet. The remaining building, all the other facades and elevations are going to remain as is.
And briefly tell the board what materials will be used for the gymnasium and how they are compatible with the existing building.
What the gymnasium is going to be made out of, as far as the exterior, is going to be a stucco paneled system, and the stucco would be colored to match the existing building that's currently there.
Thank you. Now going to A4, which are the floor plans of the building. Now,
I hate these size papers.
the section of the building that we are going to be using for the school is how many stories?
It's basically 2 stories. However, one side does have a upper level to it. So basically what it is you enter at ground level. The main entrance would be at grade and at ground level. You then internally within the building, you can go down a level, which on the based on the grading of the property is actually almost like a walkout kind of scenario. In addition to that, on the other wing, you could actually go up to an area that has approximately 3,800 square feet as well.
Okay. Briefly, and I don't want you to go into classroom by classroom for the board, but briefly indicate how the building is going to function. And we'll hear testimony later that this will house students from K through 12, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you briefly indicate how the building will function, how the students get into the building, and how the building works?
Yeah, basically, as earlier testified, there's going to be 2 drop-offs. The main drop-off will be for cars that or students that are being brought by their parents. They're going to enter one side of the building. The other entrance is going to be over by the gymnasium area, and that's going to be the bus drop-off. As far as the flow of the school itself, it's broken down based on grades, where K through 3 is going to be on one wing, 4 through 7 is going to be on the same level. The segregation is going to occur with the middle school and upper school, where that's going to be situated on the lower level, which would be 8 through 12.
Okay. And other than classrooms, what other amenities or features will be within the confines of the building?
There's obviously going to be restroom facilities, cafeteria, gymnasium. There's going to be a nurse's area, library, computer room, biology, language, music, and any other rooms that will be associated with the school.
Okay. And can you indicate to the board where the cafeteria is and where the gymnasium is? And after you indicate that, can you take the board through the discussions or considerations you had in locating the gymnasium at that location as opposed to other locations?
Yes. After walking through the initial building, there's an existing cafeteria that is currently there. Trying to utilize that and with green in mind and trying to maintain some of the equipment and things that are already existing, we thought that we would keep the cafeteria in the location it was. At that point, we then looked at two locations as to where the gymnasium should be placed. One, as previously mentioned, between the two wings that are coming out off the building, the other where we actually proposed it. The reason we went for the latter decision was because if we were to locate it between the two wings of the building, two things would occur. One, it wouldn't have the proximity to the cafeteria that it currently has. And two, which is probably even more important, is we'd lose a substantial amount of windows within the classrooms that would then reduce the light and air that the classrooms are going to have. Both of these wings currently have windows on the first, second floors of those spaces. If we infilled that with a gymnasium, that would then be lost.
Now, there is also on the plans on the right side of Exhibit A4 a large open space on what would be that's the second level, I believe. Is that correct? No, all the way over on the right, at the bottom. Keep going. In the building. Right
Here.
there.
Yes.
What's that?
That's an auditorium.
Okay, so that is another common space other than classrooms.
Yes.
And what is the purpose of the auditorium?
The auditorium is going to be, if the upper class has an event that they needed, a large amount of people to attend, whether it be a play for their theatrics course or what have you.
So it's another open space for use, and that's within the area of the high school students?
Yes, it is, and within the area of the existing structure.
Okay. And obviously, when this building is retrofitted, it will meet all of the requirements that are necessary for it to function as a school with the whatever retrofits need to be made. It also will be ADA accessible. Is that correct?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
I have a couple. First of all, the cafeteria has a functioning kitchen?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And there are laboratories?
Yes.
Chemistry, biology, all of those?
Yes.
That are safe, okay. And the auditorium, that will only be for use for the upper school? Will the lower school not have any kind of auditorium use?
Well, at the lower level, you have the gymnasium and the cafeteria for gathering. I mean, there may be an occasion, and I'll have the principal testify if you want to ask him the question, but primarily to try to
Okay,
keep
so you can use that as a multi-purpose room, I guess. Okay.
Any other questions?
Just one question. Is the school use connected to the rest of the building, or is it segregated in some way?
Right now, the only connection that, I'm sorry, there's two connections that, based on this design, currently have access to the remainder of the building. One is when you come in the main entrance, if you were to go left. The other would be off of where the cafeteria is. There's a doorway that goes into the main building. Our intention is to eliminate and close off both of those entrances, so there's no access to the existing building from the school, and that they would be totally segregated from one another. Okay. And that if in the future this building has a use, there would be a separate entrance, main entrance provided for access to that facility.
Okay, I don't know if this is a question for the architect and/or the principal, but in the morning, when the people are arriving from the parking lot and when people are arriving on the other side from the school buses, where do they go in the building?
Okay. So it really depends on what grade you're in and where you're being dropped off. If you're dropped off by your parent and you're in the lower school, for example, you would come in the main entrance here and then either go to this wing here or go to this wing here. And when I say lower school, I'm talking K through 7, I believe that would be. If you're in the upper school and you get dropped off over here, you come in the main entrance, there's a stairwell right here that brings you downstairs to the upper school, okay? If you are a student that's coming by bus, you would get dropped off over by the gymnasium cafeteria area. Entrance would either be through the gymnasium or there's an entrance that currently exists off to the side over here. Again, if you come in here and you're lower school, you access the first floor, you have access to that. If you come in here and you're the upper school, there's a staircase right here that brings you down to the upper school level. So the segregation between the upper school and lower school is very minimal. I'm assuming would be supervised with the security of the school system as well. But there is a distinct separation between the two.
Okay, and then in the afternoon, could you briefly describe how the students are staged, or where do they go before they go onto the bus, and how does that all happen? Is that the principal, or?
Yeah, the principal's here, I'm sure he
Okay.
can answer that.
If you,
We'll wait to hear about that.
Are the students moving?
if you have a student, how does he get downstairs?
There's going to be 2 elevators that are provided. One is currently existing on this wing here. The other elevator will be a new elevator that's going to be installed on this wing as well. From floor to floor, there is a level change, okay? But the existing building already takes into account that, and there are ramps between this level and this level, as well as on the lower level, there's a ramp that brings you up and down, which is all ADA and compliant.
Are the students, I'm assuming, they're able to go from the classroom areas to the cafeteria and the gymnasium and be indoors all the way? What would be the route from?
If you are 10, 11, or 12, you're going to be located in this wing over here. This wing would have access to this staircase, which is right down the hall when you come up the stair, right down the hall to the cafeteria and gymnasium. If you're 7, 8, 9, and you're on the lower level here, you have 2 options. You either come across the hallway here and up the same stair that the 10 through 12 would come up and have the same access to the gym and cafeteria, or you could come up this staircase and then come across this hallway, which is flanked by offices, which was intentionally flanked by offices in order to create supervision of the older kids if they decided to come up that way as well. The lower school, which would be on the level of the cafeteria and gymnasium, just come right down and go in, and again, come across the area that has the offices over here. Although these kids have the furthest walk, these kids would certainly be supervised by their teachers going back and forth between the 2 areas.
Any other questions?
Yeah, the questions that were raised before about the dimensions of the gym.
Yes.
And if there is any possibility to make the gym smaller and move it away and reduce the variance?
Yeah, right now, it's the intention of the school, I believe, to have basketball on a competitive level. So we needed to provide a full court in order to accommodate that. The question was the distance from the court edge to the outer wall, and It's roughly about 20, 22 feet from where the court edge is to the outermost part of the wall. As previously testified to, we do have 5 rows of seating on each side. The 5 rows of seating accommodates roughly 320 people that could come and watch that activity, whether it be basketball, volleyball, or whatever else it's going to be. To reduce the number of people, yes, it is possible, but I wouldn't recommend it.
And then if there is an event at the gymnasium, where would people park and how would they traverse the building to get to
Again, I kind of think that's going to depend on what kind of event it is. If it's a basketball event, they're obviously going to use the parking lot out here, come in the building, and then just come across the hallway and go straight in. If it's something else where people could come in and access this way, then so it kind of depends. I think I think probably the majority would be through the main entrance. There would be gates that would close off the student wings, okay, that you typically see in most schools here and here. So you'd only have access directly to the gymnasium.
So is there sort of an aisle in the cafeteria for people to walk, or a passageway of some sort?
Yeah, this hallway and
it's a hallway. Okay.
yeah, this hallway, this wall actually continues all the way up, and then the cafeteria has doors and restrooms that access it independently. So this is segregated. The nice thing about locating this as well adjacent to the cafeteria is that there are existing restrooms there. So if there is an event going on here, we could open up those restroom facilities to the gymnasium without them having to go further into the building.
Any other questions?
I have one. Is there room for the gym at the front of the site?
And detach it totally from the building?
No. It can be connected somehow. Just right in front of those wings. Between the loop road and the wing.
I rotated this just so the orientation is similar to the architectural plans that I was just discussing. We looked at putting it in between the 2 wings. Okay, and as previously stated, the problem with that is there's actually classrooms on the lower level and the main level of the wing here, as well as this element here, which is all glass and curved right now in the existing building. If we were to locate the gymnasium here, we would be losing all the light that's coming into the classrooms here and here.
How about in front?
Up here?
Yes.
The access to that, I think, would kind of make it impractical. You'd have to then traverse through the classroom area to get to the gymnasium, and the proximity between here and if we wanted to open up the gymnasium for refreshments during an event would also be impractical.
But it's possible. It would fit, dimension-wise.
Yeah, dimension-wise, it would probably fit.
Okay.
But again, we also have classrooms in the front here, so we'd be losing the windows and the light into those rooms.
But you could connect it with a little vestibule so that you could maintain those windows.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
What if it were at the end of that, opposite the curved windows, at the end of that open space, and you left a courtyard in the middle? Does it have room for that there?
If
Even
it was
you
to be
approached
located
a
here.
little into the courtyard, what would be a courtyard?
Yeah, I kind of think the space in between the courtyard was also tight. Yeah, again, I would say you're trying to fit it in with a shoehorn at that point.
I'm talking about the lower end where you're entering, right there,
Mm-hmm,
not up at the other side.
yeah.
I'm not, I understand what you're saying about having it next to the cafeteria, but there's thousands of new modern schools where the gym is located totally segregated from everything. It's not, not the, if it makes a better fit, I would look at it,
Yeah.
but that's up to the board too. At least you don't lose the light. You gain some kind of space for a courtyard that could have uses or not have uses, depending on how imaginative the facility is. And the other thing is, when the kids are actually using it for phys ed, you don't have to walk all the way through all the hallways to get to it. It's right adjacent to the classroom area. And it doesn't block any light.
Yeah, I mean, that might be true. We could look at that, the possibility of locating it there. Again, I think, however, there's a lot more plus to locating it adjacent to the cafeteria. Kids during cafeteria time could possibly go into the gymnasium, utilize it. During events, you have the access to the cafeteria without having to construct a whole nother refreshment area adjacent to where the new gymnasium would be. We'd have to look at the fact that we currently have existing restroom facilities in the cafeteria that now we would need to incorporate additional restrooms. So I think the building itself, if we were to locate it over here, is actually probably going to be bigger than what we're proposing, given the location that it's in.
I think what you're hearing, and I think the board can understand from your perspective as the architect designing it, that the location is optimal from in your opinion,
Right.
but it creates a need for variance.
Mhm.
And really what you need to prove is that either, from a zoning perspective, that this location is an improvement, or there's some type of hardship that prevents you from putting it in a compliant situation. That's why we're asking you these questions. So, we may have to see how the rest of this meeting goes, and if you're going to come back or if the board's ready to vote, but, the board may ask you to look at this a little bit further and see if there's other locations.
If you were moving it, it also would create a definite separation of the gym from the remainder of the building, should it ever become used for something else. You said it's tight. It looks like you might actually have more room at the other location. I don't know. You're talking about 24 feet from the side of the court to the wall of the building where you have to fit bleachers in. You have a slightly bigger facility. You have a little more access around the court. I don't know what the dimensions of the court are that you have designed for that facility.
Yeah, it's a standard high school size court.
Which is, because there's lots of standard sizes. You have room, but let's make it quick. You have room to have a full-size court with a proper three-point line, with a proper distance on the sides from the sideline to the three-point line. I mention that because I know a couple places that built gyms where you couldn't shoot a three-point shot and stay in bounds. And then you have a safety issue with players running into spectators sitting and running into the bleachers in general.
Yeah, the overall width of the court area, including the bleachers, is 94 by 80. That gives you clearance from the court to the first bleacher of roughly 3 feet.
Which is minimum, very
Yes.
minimum.
Right. But that's what we would have if we were to locate the court within here as well.
Well,
No,
I
but
wasn't
they're
talking
talking
about
about
it
further
there. I
down.
was talking about dropping it.
In the front.
Actually, in the front, you're gonna have pretty much the same size. If I was to take this building and turn it and put it here, I could pretty much only fit 80 feet here as well. So I'm not gonna really,
Yeah, and When I was suggesting moving it and closing that open area,
right, but then it gets back to the fact that if the gym goes within this area and gets enclosed,
No, no,
you know,
no.
draw a line
Drop it
across
down.
there
right here.
and drop it down.
Right.
Right.
That's, the problem with that is I still only have the 80 feet to work with here. So the width of the building is still going to remain. I understand we're going to alleviate the necessity for the variance up at the top, but it's not going to improve the court itself, because the width is still going to be the same 80 feet that I have up here.
How many square feet are down there?
I'm sorry?
You're building a building with 9,800 square feet.
Yes.
How much is the area down there?
Okay. All right, so the building width here is 80 feet.
That's 9,800 square feet.
80 by 94, you said.
Yes.
And that's 9,800 square feet.
80 by 94 plus the locker area. Comes out to 9,800
So
square
how much
feet.
square feet is
The actual width of the building is 80 feet. If I was to come down 80 feet off the face of this building, it puts it roughly about 12 feet off the road. If I was to take the same 80 and come down 80, I'll be 12 feet away from the road at that point.
That's lengthwise, right? But if you
No,
turn it the
no.
other way,
That width, going here, the length, I have plenty of room. I'm not disagreeing with the width, with the length. But in terms of the width of the building, I would only be roughly 12 feet from the road. And that's placing the building, the new gymnasium, right up against the existing structure, which at that point, I would be losing windows within these classrooms. If I pull this structure off the building, let's say 6 feet, then my new gymnasium is only going to be 6 feet off the road.
But 6 feet is further than it is from the proposed road.
The engineer said it's roughly similar.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, this road is used primarily for buses. This road is going to be used by buses and people and everyone else coming in all the time. So we went through the scenario over and
I
over.
just think there's some merit to looking at that. You would be putting it in a much more convenient location to your parking lot. Unless that creates another variance, you're eliminating a variance. You don't have the S-curve in the road back there that is going to be created. And for what it's worth, it's also moved away from a pipeline. Well, that's the variance, I guess, but I don't want to tie up the whole night with this. It's something to think about if there are any other questions.
And now, you said the gym will have about 320 seats,
Yes.
and we only have about 283 parking spots. So if you have a championship event there, say a charter school championship basketball event, and all the seats are full, and a lot of people come with their own cars.
The engineer testified that there is adequate parking for that. If all the seats in the gymnasium were filled, we have enough parking.
The ordinance is one parking space for every 4 seats, so if there's 320, we would only need 80 parking spaces.
So four people come in every car.
That's the ordinance. But again, we have 280, which is more than adequate.
Other questions?
I have a question. So inside the main building, is the whole thing 2 stories?
Yes,
The main rectangle?
yes.
All right, what is the,
So basically, you enter this level at grade.
no, the part you're not leasing?
Yes, what about that?
It's a full 2 stories in the entire thing?
No, it's predominantly one with a loft in the middle.
And what's the ceiling height on that?
I believe it's 16 feet. It wasn't high enough for a gymnasium. We looked at,
Okay.
we actually looked at taking this building and incorporating it into the existing structure, and the ceiling heights weren't adequate for that.
Okay. Will there be outdoor recreation?
There is nothing proposed at this time. There will be in the future, and that will be subject of, obviously, a new application. We need to figure out when, where, why, how, and also we need to figure out if there is going to be a subsequent user where that parking would be. So ultimately, there will be some sort of an application before this board to permit outdoor recreation, but right now, we haven't gotten there yet.
But that would be on-site, correct?
That would be on site, yes.
Well, how far are we to go then? Because on-site recreation on other parts of the property might, if it involves other facilities, affect the ability to provide future parking if the other part of the building gets used.
Well, I mean, there are opportunities, again, we haven't gone there yet, and that's what we have to figure out, but there are opportunities. There's a green area right in the middle of the building that is available for outdoor recreation. Is that correct, Mr. Feldman?
Yes, this area right here is actually an open space.
Well, you're talking about outdoor recreation as in playtime, not a baseball, softball field or...
We're not going to be proposing any of that, no. And also that area between the 2 wings would also be an area for outdoor recreation. But, we're not proposing any ball fields.
The one that's too small for a gym.
Well, it wasn't necessarily also too small for the gym, it's the windows. But you can
Any
have...
other questions? We'll open to the public. Is there anyone who would like to ask this witness questions?
How's it going? Ed Potosnik, 163 Home Street. Some of you may know me as president of the Board of Education. Just want to clarify, I'm here today as a normal citizen, someone who cares deeply about our young people in the township. I do have a couple questions, specifically around the safety issues you mentioned, and it's hard to see a little bit from the background, the layout, but sort of walling off the 2 areas. And what comes to mind, I know from my experiences, we're not using schools anymore as polling locations because, adults coming in, you don't know who they are, strangers, you have kindergartners. So what kinds of safety measures are there to protect young people from the other part of the building where there could be people with criminal records? Are there going to be background checks on those kinds of things? Is that going to be contingency of this zoning application, that if it's granted, that there be some sort of measures involved to ensure the safety of the students?
Mr. Potosnik, the other part of the building is not part of the application, except to the extent that I've represented that any use of that other part of the building would be the subject of a subsequent development application before this board. As we testified to, and as Mr. Feldman testified to, that other section of the building will be completely segregated and not accessible by whoever is in that building or will be occupying that building to the school. They will be separate from each other. So that's whatever's going to happen there will happen independent and separate of the school.
And is that appropriate, like through the Department of Community Affairs, to have a mixed use like that, a separate building, where you have a school alongside of maybe manufacturing? It was Exxon before that had been there with storage. Is it okay to mix schools right alongside of other things, according to the?
We have a facility in this municipality that is another charter school, which is adjacent to a distribution facility on the same site.
So that would be something that is allowable under the DCI code?
Yes.
Okay, and is it possible that what you described here would change in any way? Because it hasn't gone for the DCA review for educational adequacy, right? So there could be significant modifications from their perspective, or recommendations they have. So this is sort of like a general proposal, but it really could be honed and crafted and through the normal township approval process for construction as well, right?
We would have to get all the necessary approvals, obviously. To the extent that any changes are requested or required by DCA within the confines of the walls of the building, they would be building permit issues. If for some reason we had to change the footprint of the building, then we would have to come back to the board. But if the DCA said, move this classroom from here, from point A to point B within the confines of the building, we would not have to come back here for that change.
And would the applicant be amenable to having one of the contingencies if a variance was granted, that they are not using the outdoor areas? It seems like there's a lot of fields and things. You're testifying to the fact that, they're not going to be used as ball fields, but you don't really need very much to play soccer. And I think it's a great idea. I think every school should have those facilities. But I would hate to have one thing be said and then something else in practice and have that be stipulated.
What we've said, and just to make it clear, is that this application that the board is reviewing tonight proposes no outdoor activities, no play fields, congregation areas for kids. We will make a subsequent application for some outdoor activities. When we discussed it previously, it was not going to be baseball fields or soccer fields. It was going to be more for the younger children to have some outdoor activities. But that would have to come back. Whatever we do has to come back to the board to be reviewed to make sure it's in the appropriate location, that it's safe, and as they did with a previous application that we had.
Okay, those are my questions for now. Thanks.
Any others? All right, we'll close to that, for that witness. I guess you would like an adjournment for a few minutes? A break? All right, 5 minutes.
Chairman, during recess, we discussed, I still have 3 witnesses left, and it's 9:30. And as I indicated earlier, you only have 6 members. So I think at this juncture, if we can try to get through the principal and our traffic consultant this evening, and then continue the matter to your next meeting in January, so that we can hopefully have some members who can spend Christmas Day looking at the tape or something because they have nothing better to do. But it also will give us an opportunity to review some of the issues you raised concerning the gymnasium to see if it is feasible, practical, realistic to move it. So I think it would make sense that we do not try to run this thing through and conclude it tonight. But I will go to my next 2 witnesses.
Good evening.
Okay. If you'll raise your right hand for me, solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name for the record.
Namik Serkan, Namiksercan.
Okay.
You can be seated, Mr. Serkan.
Thank you.
Mr. Serkan, you are the principal of the charter school?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and when did you become principal?
August 12, 2016 for the school, but I've been a school principal since 2005.
Okay, and having been a school principal since 2005, have you been involved in charter schools before this school?
Yes, my principalship has always been in charter schools.
Okay, and you came to this school this year, and can you briefly indicate to the board, first of all, where's your current location?
My current location is 17 Schoolhouse Road, Somerset, Georgia. Somerset, New Jersey. I'm sorry, 08873.
Okay, and what grades do you currently have in the school?
Our charter is approved for kindergarten through 12, but currently for the school year 2016 and 17, we have grades kindergarten through 2nd and 6 through 12.
Okay, and you will ultimately be filling in grades 3, 4, and 5. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and your charter, you indicate, is from K through 12. How many students are you allowed pursuant to your current charter?
624 students in total.
Okay, and do you have an application before the state of New Jersey to expand that charter to allow you to take more students?
That's correct.
And when did you make that application?
We submitted on November 30th.
And how many students, additional students, are you looking to add?
Additional 624 students in 5 years.
So in 5 years, you would hope to bring the enrollment to 1,248 students. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, now, at the present time, how many faculty members, aides, custodial people, how many employees do you have at your present location?
70.
Okay,
I'm sorry, say that again?
70.
okay. And at your present location, you have students that come to the school both by bus, by parent drop-off, and do you have some students who drive?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And where do your students come from?
Our students come from 3 school districts, including Franklin Township, North Brunswick, and New Brunswick.
Okay. And approximately, what are the percentages of the students that drive, come by bus, and or dropped off by their parents?
We have around 20 students who are driving, and we have 11 school buses. They are not full-size school buses. Not all of them are full-size school buses. And rest of them are, the parents provide the transportation.
Okay. And the setup that you currently have at the present school, is there a segregation between the parents who drop off their children and where the buses come in?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and how do you administer that?
Well, elementary school students have a separate entrance to the building and exit location to the building from higher levels, middle and high schools. and we have three entrance to the building and exit from the building.
Okay. What are your current hours of operation?
7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay. And I assume that those times will be carried over to the new location?
That is correct.
Okay, and when you say 7:30 to 4 p.m., what are the times that the children arrive and what time are classes?
It differs. We have students arriving as early as 7:15. We let them enter the building until 7:50.
Okay.
So they don't come at the same time.
Okay, and what time do classes start?
8:20.
Okay, and what time do classes end?
3:08.
Okay, so the school day is 8:20 to 3:08.
The class time, yes. After the classes, we have after-school activities.
And then you have after-school activities that go till 4 p.m.
Until 4 p.m.
Okay.
Yes.
And at your present location, you have a cafeteria, you
Correct.
have a gymnasium, all of the things that are being proposed at the new location currently exist at the present location.
Yes.
And what is the goal or mission of your charter school?
We are a college prep charter school, meaning that we encourage as many students as possible to take advanced level of courses so that they are prepared for the colleges and beyond.
Okay. And what is your graduation rate, and how many of your students do you place in colleges?
We've had 100% of graduation rate and 100% of college admission rate for the past 5 years, and we are the only charter school who received the Blue Ribbon Award in 2016 in the state of New Jersey.
Now, we talk about the ultimate expansion of the school should the state approve the charter for your expansion. What do you envision your employment as far as faculty, staff, again, custodial personnel will be should the charter be granted for the expansion, and in 5 years you're fully up to 1,248 students?
Yes, I anticipate to have 150 staff members, all inclusive.
Okay. And you also now say you have 20 students who drive.
That's correct.
Okay. Can any child drive, or do they get permission from the school to drive?
Well, they get permission from the school to drive.
So you restrict the number of students who can drive?
That is correct.
Okay. And if we were to move to the new location, obviously you still will have more students. Would you be agreeable to restricting the number of students who would drive?
Based on the availability of the space, yes.
Okay. And what would that number be?
It'll be around 40 students.
Okay. Double what you have now?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicate that you have after-school activities.
Correct.
Okay. Well, let me back up. When students come to the school at the new location, you will, as indicated on the plans from Mr. Stiers and as discussed by Mr. Fellman, we have an area where parents who drive their children will drop them off. You will provide personnel to get them from that drop-off area or that parking area into the school?
That is our current practice, and we're going to retain that practice.
Okay, and obviously, the number of personnel that you will need will change
Yes.
depending on the number of students.
Absolutely.
Okay. With respect to the children that come into the school in the morning by bus, as Mr. Fellman and Mr. Stiers testified, they will either enter, again, through the gymnasium, assuming the gymnasium's still back there.
Yes.
Or through the cafeteria.
Correct.
And again, you will have personnel at the drop-off area to make sure those children get safely into the school.
Absolutely.
Okay. After school, how do the children get to either their parents, if they are being driven, or to the buses if they have to go to the buses?
Well, they will exit from this building the same way they enter. If the parents will pick up the children, children will be escorted to the parking space by our personnel, or if the child, if this, the bus riders will go to the designated places in the cafeteria and the gymnasium to get on the bus.
Now, you also indicate that you have some after-school activities.
Correct.
Can you just briefly indicate what types of activities you have that take place after school?
They are either tutorings or preparation for competitive events like science fairs, science olympiads, or we offer clubs like debate club and broadcasting club type of stuff. These are extracurricular activities.
And approximately how many students stay on any given day for these extracurricular activities?
Around 20%.
Okay. And when those activities are done at 4 o'clock, are those children bused also?
They are mostly carpoolers. So the parents will come and pick them up, but we'll have few late buses that'll provide transportation.
Okay. Now, at the present time, does the school play competitive basketball with other schools?
Not at this moment. We have basketball team, we have volleyball team, but our sport activities is limited due to the facility matters. That's one of the biggest motivation for us to move into a better facility so that we can offer extended services in that area.
Okay. And if we were to move to this new location and we were to build a gymnasium somewhere, you intend to have competitive basketball?
That is true.
Okay. And then that would take place after 4 o'clock, after all of the other activities?
Most of the games take place after 4 p.m.
Okay, so at that time, all the students are
Will be
basically
gone.
gone, and most of the faculty will be gone, so the
That is
parking lot would be available for those activities?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does the school have any evening events?
From time to time, yes.
What kind of events?
Like back to school night or we had this concert this past week, 3 of them, and I want to say once a month, in different nature we have events like that.
Okay. Now, obviously, at some point in time, if 5 years down the road, if you were at 1,248 students, you have a parking lot of 280-some parking spaces, I assume you would be in a position to now have to stagger some of these events so that you can accommodate all of those events and provide adequate parking for parents or visitors who come to these events. Is that correct?
That is correct. All our events are school level. Basically, we have events for elementary school students only at a time and middle school students at different times and all that. So we don't invite everyone to come at the same time. So.
Okay. And your feeling is that even with the increase in enrollment, the parking lot that we are proposing should be able to handle all of the students?
Absolutely. I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Any questions from the board?
How many students come from Franklin Township?
Around 70%. 70% of our enrollment. That's approximately.
Would you anticipate that percentage remaining at build-out?
I think it's going to be around the same.
Other questions? Or open to the public? Is there anyone who'd like to ask this witness questions on his testimony?
Ed Potosnik, 163 Home Street, again here in a personal capacity. Wanted to ask what percentage of your students are English language learners?
Less than 5%.
According to my research, it was 0, as compared with Franklin Township Public Schools, which are required to take all students. We have 7% English language learners. Also, special education.
Let me just say this. If you're going to use statistics and stuff, I have to swear you in, because you're just supposed to be asking a question here. But if you're going to bolster it with, let me swear you in, so we just...
Well, that's fine. I mean, it is that's fine.
I don't mind you doing it. It's just, I need to swear you in if you're going to do it.
In what capacity?
Because you're providing facts
Okay.
that need to be.
The other question, Mr. Bradshaw, is really the relevancy of what kind of students and the number of students as to the land use application. So
Well, Mr. Linford, when you had asked, sort of what the graduation rate was, it made me think, I think it's important to know the composition of the student body.
Yeah, I mean, give him some leeway on that, but if he's going to actually put out statistics that he wants the board to take.
He should be sworn.
But if he.
I'll avoid this. I can provide written matter if it pleases the board to that effect. You have an idea of the percentage of special education students?
I think it's around 7%.
Great. And how does that compare to the districts that you serve? Is that about the same or greater?
I don't have the picture on that.
Okay. I guess the other question that I have is related to the use of the facilities. You had mentioned with the gym, and I'm sort of struggling a little to understand, there's room for about 200 or 250 people in it, and I know that I guess I would say the rules with regard to how many parking spots you need per visitor is 4 to 1, but like on a back-to-school night when all the parents are coming, do you do any kind of activities like that that could, go outside of maybe what that ratio would look like?
Like I said, our events are school-based. Not all parents will come at the same time. If we're going to have a back-to-school night, it will be separate for elementary school, middle school, and high school.
To accommodate the parking lot?
Absolutely.
Great, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Richard Seaman, 34 Rue Chagall. I am also a member of the Franklin Township Board of Education, but I am not here in my capacity as a board member. I am here as a citizen of Franklin Township. I've lived in the township since 1993. The principal testified to a submission to the State Department of Education for expansion of the school and suggested that the document projects an increase of 624 students in the next 5 years. The document does not say that. I have the document. The document is available to the board from the Board of Education. The document is a 3-year projection.
Okay, so
that
you're
only
going to have to be sworn in, obviously. You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay.
I have the document. It was provided to the District Board of Education on November 30th. Board is welcome to have it. The document discusses 2 campuses, a campus in New Brunswick and a campus in Somerset. The Somerset campus not exceeding 960 children in the span, I believe, up to 2020. So I am concerned that it appears this board is reviewing documents based on a population that is not only not approved by the Department of Education, but it's not even the population that the school has requested.
Okay, but understand that.
But sir, it makes a difference. It makes a difference in all of the questions that have been discussed tonight. The size of the gym, the size of the auditorium, the number of buses, number of cars, number of parking spaces, number of staff. It makes a difference in every component of the determination of how to design this building and how the land is used. And so what they've presented to you and what they've discussed tonight is not what they've asked the state of New Jersey to allow them to do.
So you're saying that they've asked the state of New Jersey to allow them less students?
It's immaterial what they've allowed them. They've allowed them they've asked to be allowed for something different. And yet we're here talking about something else.
But if you say it affects it, does it affect it positively or does it affect it negatively?
As a citizen, that's not my issue.
Well, but it's the board's issue. I'm trying to.
It's the board's issue to determine whether what's been provided to them is what they really intend to do. Or after months and months and months of meetings, are they going to come and ask for a different number of students because the Department of Education received a different document?
Well, let me just tell you fundamentally in a vacuum how it works. This board gives approval based upon the municipal land use law, and whether or not the application and the applicant themselves have put forth sufficient proofs to warrant the board to grant that. Right. Okay. They're still subject to every other regulation outside of this board because the board has no say on that. And similarly, whatever that they've applied for, whatever state wants to give them, is going to happen whether or not this board does A or whether or not this board does B. So your point, while relevant as to the board obviously wants as much information as possible, if they never get to put in the amount of students they just testified they want, that's really of no mind to the board. Either they've approved their application or they haven't. I don't know if I'm making sense to you, but that's their hard luck if they don't get it from the state and don't fill the school that they get approved for, is what I'm saying.
I understand your point. I think the point I'm trying to raise very simply is that the discussion tonight, and I think the further discussion that you'll have, it all comes down to the number of children and the number of staff. All of the choices that are made come down to that. And I'm telling you, because I'm completely aware of it, that it appears that the numbers that are being discussed are not the numbers that have been requested. So you may go through this entire process for 1,248 children. And what I'm saying to you is that that number may or may not materialize.
Okay.
And I think that it's important to folks in the township to understand that the folks who run the charter school have provided different information to different approval bodies. And that's a concern to me.
Okay.
My expectation would be that they would provide the same information to all the bodies that have to approve their applications, whether it's the state DOE, whether it's the New Jersey DCA, whether it's the Delaware River Canal Commission, I think I got their name wrong, or,
I got you.
et cetera.
Mr. Lanford, do you have it seems like you want to reply to that. Do you have it?
My client perhaps can reply.
Yes, actually, if you read the application carefully, it's a 3-year projection.
It is.
And I
Correct.
said to the board that we would like to reach our ultimate enrollment of 1248 in 5 years. You don't get to see the numbers beyond 3 years. That's the difference.
I understand that. As I heard you describe, you stated that you made an application on November 30th, which described an increase of 624 students in 5 years. That's not what it does.
Because the state law allows you to put the enrollment projection for your remaining charter term only, which is 3 years from now.
So then what's the number at 3 years?
In the statement, 960, as far as I remember, for the Somerset campus. My enrollment projection in 5 years is 1248, as I stated before.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Nancy LaCourte, 6 Blackwells Mills, Somerset. I, too, am on the Franklin Township Board of Education, but I'm here because I've grown up in Franklin. I'm curious, how are you funded? Because you're, building a gymnasium and all these other things. So how are you funded?
Same way that the typical public schools are funded.
Okay. So my other question is, we actually spend $770,000 a month to charter schools, your school being one of them. And it's kind of a duplication of services because.
Okay, so
I'm going to object to that. That's irrelevant to the
thought you would.
application.
Okay.
That's something you can say as a statement at the end,
Okay.
but right now we're really focusing on his testimony.
All right. With the parking lot and the special events that you're going to have going on, it's usually not 4 people going in a car, and I understand that you're going to have, like the upper class and then the lower class, but there's going to be times when it's going to be everybody and not 4 people in a car. Like, a parent might come from one place, a grandparent might come, things like that. So it's really going to be a lot more people, and how are you going to accommodate that?
I disagree with you. It's a matter of scheduling of the events.
Okay. So, how many kids are going to be in the high school?
When?
Pick a time, I don't know, like,
No, you gotta be specific because the enrollment is different by the years.
okay, so you have 280 parking spaces, you have to have staff present, you have to have custodians, security, things like that for your school that you have to have anyway. But now you're going to have some students drive?
You have a question, Nancy?
Yeah, I do, I actually do.
I mean,
I
they've
don't understand.
testified ad nauseum about how they're gonna take care of the traffic, and I'm just, if there's a
okay.
question,
Well, I
think-
just don't
I think to answer your-
understand, and
I
I'm
think
trying
answer your
to.
question, 'cause
Sure.
I think I know where you're going. I think the staff, what the testimony was that they would be at full build-out, 150 staff, right? And then the testimony was that the student drivers at full build-out would be limited to 40. So then you add those together, 190 spaces are going to be used at full build-out compared to the 200-something that are in the lot.
Right, but when you hold an event and it's the high school students having an event, and you're gonna have parents, you're gonna have grandparents, you're gonna have a lot more cars per student.
and they've testified to that, that's
But
the
event-
point.
And the
I-
event, the numbers I gave you were during the day.
No, I'm talking about in the evening.
Okay, well.
Or if you have, you're talking about using your gymnasium for like championship basketball events or something?
Yes.
Okay, so you're gonna have kids from other schools, their coaches, I'm sure they're gonna be bringing their buses, but you're gonna have other people, you're gonna have more people in cars, so I kind of don't see how you're gonna have enough parking. But, and where are you gonna, like, if there's an emergency, where will the kids be evacuated to? Is there like a special spot on your, plans where you're gonna evacuate
All the
students to?
drawings are made based on the codes, and they'll be under consideration.
Okay, okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll close that part. Again, one question did come to mind. He testified their goal was 1,200 and what, 1,280?
1248.
In the paperwork I have here, it says 750 or 780.
That was the original application, which was amended. There was an amended application with amended reports. Everything that we submitted, including the floor plans, the traffic study, was based on the 1248 number.
All right, all of your testimonies being based on 1,200.
All the testimony is based on the 1,248 students. That's why the number changed to 26 buses. Our traffic study done by our next witness is based on the 1248 number, and that's the number that we're seeking approval for.
And what happens if you get to that limit?
That's what our charter would be from the state of New Jersey, assuming they gave it, so we couldn't take more than 1,248 students.
And then for any additional, you'd have to come back.
We would have to come back to you, and we'd have to amend our charter with the state of New Jersey also.
Okay, here, it's on page 2 of Assistant Township Engineer. As per traffic impact statement, the school has 780 students.
He revised that report because he originally drafted the report based on the original plans, and then he did revise the report to have the...
Okay, as long as we're clear, you're talking what the testimony is for 1,200.
All the testimony is as for the 1248. Mr. Vega, when he reviewed it, had the traffic study with the 1248, and I believe he did amend the...
Okay, next witness, that's fine.
Here's the amended.
For the record, I would look at the project description on page 2 of my report reflects all of the updated information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
I can tell you, Julio may have made a mistake and not have updated the traffic numbers, but his review was based on all the new stuff, because we did it at the TRC, so all the reviews have been based on that 1248.
Okay, as long as
We
we're
got an amended,
all on the same page. that's
Yeah, he'll have to fix the preface, the comments later on regarding traffic, he did, because he reviewed the traffic report, and we met with them, he just forgot to change in the beginning.
Okay. You're a witness. Go ahead.
Mr. Troutman?
Thank you.
Okay, sir, if you raise your right hand, you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And your name for the record.
Jay Troutman, Troutman.
Mr. Troutman, you are a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey specializing in traffic?
Yes.
Okay, and have you testified before this board on previous occasions?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Let's go forward.
Just one other quick question. Have you also testified on applications involving schools?
I have, yes.
You were retained by the applicant to prepare a traffic report in conjunction with this application, is that correct?
I did. I prepared a traffic report for the original plans that were filed, and then I issued a revised report dated November 17th, 2016, based on the revised plans that are before the board tonight, and to also address comments that we had seen from the township professionals. I can tell you that I've also reviewed the comments from the professionals, which we may get into some of those later, but I can tell you that we would be prepared to address each and every one of those comments. Hopefully I can hit on some of those during my testimony. One of the first items has to do with the access driveway out along Metlers Road on Exhibit A1. And we did an investigation of that access, and it shows that that is suitable for the traffic generated by this school, and there's adequate sight distance along this section. There's actually some generous extra paved areas and turning radii that are already present, extra paved areas due to the prior use of the site, which involved trucking, and we have school buses, which are also larger vehicles, so it's compatible from that standpoint. In terms of traffic flow along Metlers, this is actually a fairly undeveloped area, and our counts show that the volumes are relatively light along Metlers during the day and during the weekday peak hours. There is plenty of reserve capacity due to that light volume to process additional traffic that would be generated by the school. In terms of traffic patterns, the school has a pattern that's slightly offset from roadway peak hours, as well as from what you would expect from a permitted use of this site, maybe like the former Exxon use that filled up that parking lot and emptied that parking lot every day. The school peak hour would tend to be a little bit earlier in the morning because of the start time, more like 7:15 to 8:15, and your office peak hour would be a little bit later. And then in the afternoon, the same thing. The school peak hour is more like 3:30 to 4:30, where your typical roadway peak or an office user would be a little bit later. We also had an opportunity to review the internal plans and work with the principal and work with the engineer on signing and designing how the building would intake all of the students in the morning and then dismiss. We find that the driveway system and the parking lot will be able to accommodate the efficient intake of all of the users of the school, including the buses and the staff vehicles and the student vehicles, and that we have adequate areas to process all that activity, even at full build-out, which is 5 years from now. We got to look at the existing operation, which is just a fraction of what this could ultimately be in 5 years, and have used some of that data to project forward to what the full build-out would be. So I guess in terms of parking, in terms of areas to bring people in terms of segregating buses, we find that the site can operate acceptably. And again, we find also that Metlers has the type of capacity that you would need to accommodate all those turning movements that are going to occur every day with the buses and the staff and the parents.
Mr. Troutman, did you also look at all of the turning radii on the access road to determine whether the buses can safely make all the turns and traverse the property without any problems?
Yes, some of the sharper turns. One occurs up here in this northwest corner around the perimeter of the lot. There's another turn in the back of the building. We've looked at all those turns, and again, there was trucking here, large vehicles, and those pavement areas are adequate to accommodate a bus, and we can depict that for staff to demonstrate that.
Okay, you've done the templates and it all works.
That's correct.
Okay, and you heard the testimony earlier of Mr. Stiers of the discussion he had with the school and the owner, that the portion of the loop road where the buses will traverse behind the building will be one way.
Yes.
And that's the intent, and we will appropriately sign that.
That's correct. And that makes it even easier for buses to swing through curves when it's only one way. There's no chance of an oncoming vehicle while the bus is going through the curve.
Okay. Now, did you also analyze the curve that is being proposed adjacent to where the gymnasium is being proposed as to whether it meets standards?
We did. We took a look at that. There are some standards, for example, that the New Jersey Residential Site Improvement Standards would publish actually for two-way traffic through that curve where a 100-foot radius would be acceptable. It's a one-way oversized width curve, so we don't see any, there is no issue with a bus traversing through there and accessing the sidewalk.
Notwithstanding that, we'd be willing to sit down and work with staff to see if we can soften that curve or modify it to make it a gentler curve so that things can operate more smoothly on the subject property.
Yes.
Now, when you analyzed this site, obviously, some of the information that you used in your report, you got that information from the principal of the school, correct?
I did, yes. I sat down with the principal over at his existing school, so I got to see how the school works and some of the things that happen, and then got to sit with him and discuss the future plans.
Okay, and then based on the discussions that you had with him, based on the observations that you made at the existing site on the way students are handled entering and exiting the site, given that this site has the 280 parking spaces, do you have an opinion as to whether this parking lot is adequate for the daily, day-to-day operations of the school?
It is definitely adequate for the day-to-day operations based on the numbers that have already been stated tonight, the staff demand, the student parking demand, and then the remaining availability for parent drop-off.
Okay. Now, assuming the gymnasium, wherever it may wind up, has the same seating capacity, do you have an opinion based on both standards and what's there as to whether there is adequate parking should there be an athletic event that takes place within the confines of the gymnasium?
I believe the parking will function acceptably. It meets ordinance. It far exceeds ordinance. So even if ordinance is short, if it's not estimating properly, we have double that amount or more.
Okay. The same thing if there was an event to take place in the auditorium, which is another one of the larger rooms within the confines of the building. Do you have an opinion as to whether there is adequacy of parking within the existing parking spot for an event that takes place within the auditorium?
Yes, there is adequate parking for an event in the auditorium as well.
Okay. And again, we had a discussion this evening that some of the events, like the back-to-school nights, obviously would have to be staggered because you couldn't have some of those events on with parents coming or if there's a play or something with the 280 parking spaces if everybody were to come at one time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that would be monitored by the school.
Yes, it is a matter of scheduling, as the principal said. These schools are very good at discerning the scheduling issues and using their facilities properly in that regard.
Okay. One other issue that was raised in the report of Mr. Vega, we plotted the parking of the buses around the building and indicated that there were 26 buses that were parked or were able to be parked around that building. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. and the way the buses were depicted on the plan showed the buses basically almost abutting each other around the building. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Vega, in one of the comments in his report, indicates that there should, that method of calculating is probably not accurate, that there should be a separation between the buses and that you can't get 26 buses. Do you have an opinion as to whether Mr. Vega is correct in his assessment on how buses park around the building and what's the preferred method of handling the parking of buses?
Well, actually, in discussing this with another client of mine who operates a bus company, and also my personal observations, it is in fact true that buses do park end to end. They specifically park in that fashion so as not to promote pedestrians trying to walk between the buses. So it is a high-density stack as shown on the plan. The likelihood of ever having 26 buses at one time is extremely remote. You have your early buses that are there and gone. You have the bulk of the buses coming on time, and then you have your late buses that come after the bulk of the buses are gone. So the chances of ever even having the 26 is rare, but they could be stored if that ever happened.
Okay, so in your opinion, the layout to handle the buses around the building and to keep them segregated from the student drivers, from the parents who are dropping off their children, or from the faculty members, the separation is, in your opinion, appropriate and adequate?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any board questions? Anything from the public? This would be questions concerning traffic.
Ed Potosnik, 163 Home Street. As a citizen, how many buses does the Central Jersey College Prep currently have servicing it?
Currently, they have, let me just check my notes here. 11.
11. And they're at about, I think, 500 students. Is that about right, what they testified previously?
Yes.
So times 2 gets you to 1,000, just quick math. Does that sound right? 22?
Yes.
And then you need a little bit more, which might get you sort of to 26. I guess my concern is that assumes about 50 people per bus, 50 students per bus, which, could fit, I guess, and assumes perfect filling. So some of these students come from different surrounding towns as far away as, let's say, Plainfield, and they may not be able to fill up an entire bus from a town. Is that currently happening, I guess? Are they filling up these buses completely, all 11 of them?
I'm not aware. I couldn't answer that question.
Okay. Would that be an important thing to know, to come up with your 26 number?
I didn't come up with the 26 number. The 26 number is what the school is going to use for the 1,248 students.
What would happen if it was more? Would from what you've testified, would that fit?
The 26 is the max. So
26 is the max.
You could store 26. That's the max you can fit.
And when you testified regarding the fact that all the buses wouldn't be there at the same time, some would come late, some would come early, where does that come from? Because my experience, I was a high school chemistry teacher for 10 years, and the buses lined up, and they lined up, and they were all in place, and then when the students came out, and they had a whole pattern, they had to go to a staging area to get in the right places, to get in the right numbers, and they all pulled in together. I've never experienced a school where they came sort of randomly at staggered. So I'm just wondering where that came from.
That comes from my observations. I have observed that, and even if it didn't play out that way, the storage is there.
Okay, so one thing that the board might consider if they accept the application is to require staggering of buses, which seems a little unusual.
I'm sorry, require what?
The staggering of the buses, because it seems like they need to be staggered.
No, there's no need to stagger. You can fit all 26.
Okay, but the 26 number, you're not sure where it comes from?
That comes from the needs of the school. That's the maximum projected number of buses.
Okay. And then I guess my other question was, we heard a lot of talk about the parking, and you mentioned some with regards to the parking. Is it, and maybe Mr. Lanford can answer this, given that they're looking for a variance, would it be applicable that the board could make a requirement to increase the parking requirement, even though there is a rule on the books, as I say, as a condition, we want this if you want that kind of thing, or is that not allowable?
Well, they're not asking for a parking variance.
Correct, but even like a variance for something else, can you make a requirement that's unrelated?
Well, I think they are seeking site plan approval as well. I mean, if the board was convinced that, based on the operations of the school, as has been testified, that the amount of parking, the 280, isn't adequate to meet the needs of the school, they absolutely could say, add X number more, we're not satisfied that 280 is enough.
Even if it meets the law, the rule on the books?
Yes.
Okay, that's what
It's, at the end of the day, this is a use variance as well, so I think the board would have that discretion.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? All right, we'll close that part of the meeting, and we're going to be looking at January 5th to continue with no further public notice. Anything we need to clean up before we?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one question? I'm sorry, of the traffic engineer, since I believe this is going to be his last time here.
I'm going to have everybody back,
Okay.
so just in case there are questions, because there's actually members that are not here and they may want to ask a question.
Yeah, let me just ask the one question with regard to parking. I mean, as far as the day-to-day operation, the numbers that we have is 150 plus 40, and you have 280. So what I hear is, during the day, I think you're going to have more than enough, based on what I've heard. The gymnasium, I've heard that you're going to have an occupancy of 320, and you have 280 spaces. I mean, based on I don't know. I don't think you're going to have necessarily 4 people per car, but I mean, you have almost 1-for-1 with regard to the gymnasium. What I hear, and I think what's been testified to, is when you're going to have a problem, a crunch, is at special events like the occasional back-to-school night. And the principal testified to this. I mean, I think he basically acknowledged, yeah, if you have 1,200 students and 280 spaces, and if one parent comes for, logically, that's going to be the one time when there's not going to be enough on the site. In your experience, to what degree is that typical for a school? What should a school design for, knowing 1,200 students, 280 spaces? In your experience, what have schools do, both public, private, charter? What do they do in these situations?
What you need to do is exactly what the principal said, is you have to stagger it. I don't see a back-to-school night for 1248 working with that parking. You would need to make other arrangements by staggering the schedule and having your back-to-school night for your lower grades on one night, your middle grades on another night, your higher grades on another night, or maybe just 2. It really has to do with the scheduling of the building. It's a very specific operation that the principal would have to work out in terms of that demand.
Is there any other, based on what you've heard tonight and other conversations you've had with your client, besides the back-to-school night, any other events that would require more than 280 spaces, or other events, other things that would require the staggering types?
No, that's the only one that I could think of, because the auditorium events are covered, the gym events are covered, and it just has to do with the scheduling of the building. You can't have the simultaneous scheduling of large events, and that back-to-school night would be the one that would have to be staggered.
All right, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I make one quick question? So the January 5th, which is your next meeting, is actually our Board of Education reorganization meeting, so we would all not be able to attend. I obviously am interested. I don't know if there's another date. I noticed that you said you're carried to that date.
That's unfortunately the next date, and then, yeah.
So no time for public, okay, we'll figure it out. Okay. There's no option to go to the next date?
Not normally.
Well, if members of public who are here,
They
we can't complete the hearing tonight, we should give them an opportunity.
Well, they have an opportunity to be here on that date. I mean, they have.
But they have a pre-scheduled meeting.
That's the board can do what they want with that. That's up to the board's discretion. But typically,
I would suggest.
But can you change your night?
I'll hear input from the board then, what
Use the mic, okay, because you're not.
do you want?
I would suggest if the only major three, public opinion, public comments, three members that are doing their own public service to the town and can't have a pre-scheduled meeting on the 5th, that you make it the next zoning board meeting after that.
Well,
Well,
that
I-
would be just great, except for the fact that, for what it's worth, you've got a short board, and I will be in Florida at that point.
Yeah, I'll be in Florida too.
And
Well,
they
then.
and they can't come to the meeting. They can't come to the meeting after that because we have Levin coming back, and that's so there's no time for at the
Yeah,
next meeting.
And we may not even have enough board members, the three of us.
What
in
meeting
Florida.
might be available?
So let him.
My concern, and again, if you're not going to have enough members, that's another issue, but assuming you're going to have 7 members, I need to complete this application as quickly as possible, because without the approval, if the board were to grant the approval, I have to apply for building permits to try to get all the retrofitting of the building to be done so that the building would be available in September. We're running on a tight schedule as it is, and quite frankly, the second meeting in the night you have Levin, on that night, I'm not available, so I would not have an open day till at least the beginning of February.
Yeah.
So I would respectfully request we keep that night, and it may be that you don't have 7 members, and if you don't have 7 members, then I'll have to deal with that, but,
What's our deadline on this? Because this is the only regular application that doesn't have one.
I'd have to look. I don't know. Do you know what the deadline date is on this? Let me look and see. It's
Also,
we were originally scheduled for October. There was a letter dated September 9th, so obviously we were deemed complete prior to September
Yeah,
9th.
I'm looking to see the date. We
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if they need 7 members, we have 6 here tonight, and half of the members here tonight won't be here at the next meeting.
Yeah, we got. That's really that's
No,
that's
I'll be
his thing,
here.
and
I'll be here at
I'll
the
be here
next
the 5th.
meeting.
Okay.
It's the following meeting on the 18th that I would have a problem with.
yeah, and you're not going to be at the meeting after that either. So
Well, we can't do anything, it appears, without an extension from the applicant.
Well, we're looking into that.
I can't see.
He's gonna give you your extension.
I don't find your letter, or many times you deem it complete via email, but I do have a letter scheduling it on September 9th, or from your staff, which obviously means it was deemed complete prior to September 9th, and if we assume even September 9th, you have 120 days from September 9th to hear the application. So you're basically at the end of the road.
You gotta do January 5th.
Unless you grant an extension.
We're all available on the 5th, and if you need an extension beyond the 5th, I will give you an extension to January 10th, but not beyond that.
Yeah, I can't find the.
I know,
I can't find the date.
That does it then, doesn't it?
Wow.
I don't know if it extends to this, but the advice I was given by our esteemed attorney is that the
Oh, okay.
judges like us to be all-inclusive and give
Yeah, that
everybody
sounds
an
about-
opportunity, which would be,
What is the, if I can interrupt you, What is it that you want? To just have your ability to make your comment?
Well, to be able to listen to the testimony and look at it from.
Because you are here not as a board member.
Yeah,
So
next time I plan to be.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, let me just counsel you quickly with regards to that.
Yeah.
Y'all can't come up and say that you represent the board. You would have to have an attorney representing all of you collectively, and then that would mean none of you speak individually, only one person speaks for you. Let me just put that out there so you're aware of that. But right now, you're just here as John Q. Public. And I will tell you, I've never seen a meeting put off just so some John Q. Public could come back and participate, because we would effectively never get anything done, because every single time someone would say, I can't meet the next meeting, and it just can't work that way. So what I was trying to vet out was whether or not you wanted to have the board allow you to make your comments while you're here tonight, based upon what you heard. Now, I don't know what's going to happen at the next meeting. They may decide to move the gym. They may decide not to. They're certainly going to have their planner testify to make the justifications. But just realize that it's a significant step for them to put a meeting off, especially an applicant who has the right to be heard and is actually paying all these people to be here. I just want you to know that.
I appreciate the consideration. I mean, I think I raised it because I know that schedule was noticed in advance, and saw the conflict when I heard the date. Certainly there's been other delays, so if it's possible, it's possible. I respect the
Can't hurt.
decisions. And
Yeah, I just
absolutely.
wanted to.
I get it.
But it is up to the board.
I believe Bill was just noticing that we originally had it posted on the website. He thinks the deadline date was January 9th.
All right,
And which sounds about right. Is that what you have, Bill? January 9th? Yeah, that would have been the day. That sounds about right, given the time frames.
20 days.
Yeah, that would sound about right, so.
Well, let's hear you speak up. I would be inclined to schedule it at the next meeting, January 5th. I don't know that we have ever changed the meeting. I think as inconvenient as it might be, it could also be better if the Board of Ed wants to get their legitimate concerns put out in the public. Maybe that's the place that the attorney represents them, and they don't need to be here necessarily physically.
I'll certainly take that under consideration with the.
That's me speaking. Is there any?
No, I agree. I agree with that.
How about? Okay, then January 5th.
Thank you guys for your time on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If there's no further business, then we'll adjourn the meeting.